We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Well, I think the aliens set fire to Canada. They're trying to kill us all.
You think it's the aliens?
Yes. I think the aliens did it.
You think that they came for what? To stop the production of maple syrup?
Yes. They are anti-maple syrup. And they hate hockey.
Don't tell Jared Kiso.
Don't. He will unbutton his cuffs and come after them.
Yeah, Wayne is coming at you.
He's the only one I think can take on the aliens. Believably. Not just any Canadian, but any man. Any man, woman, or child.
I would love to see like an updated Independence Day with Jared Kiso as the anti-alien badass fighter pilot type of, yeah.
Oh, can you see it? I can
Absolutely.
see it. And he doesn't change his expression the entire time. It's basically Wayne.
Yeah, Jared Kiso as Wayne.
Right.
Really, we just need a Letterkenny episode with aliens.
Ooh, yeah. They take down the aliens.
Right.
Like the alien walks around with a match, kind of like Bugs Bunny tiptoeing, you know?
Yeah.
And then they're like, nope, not on my watch. Puppies could die.
What do you think in terms of percentage when you look at the Venn diagram of our listeners, where you have like people that listen to Letterkenny and then people that are really interested in aliens? Do you think that that's like a big crossover in the Venn diagram?
I think there's one person. I think that person is you.
It is me. That's true.
I feel like the people that watch Letterkenny are grounded in reality.
I guess Letterkenny is sort of its own brand of reality.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Why are we talking about aliens? Oh, by the way, I'm EJ. This is Matt across the table.
Yo.
This is Slaying Monsters, and we're going to talk about, you guessed it, Letterkenny. I'm just kidding. We're talking about aliens today.
Yeah.
Not just any aliens.
So we kind of have to talk about this. We are going to try to revamp the happy hour episodes into something that's going to be hopefully a little bit quicker, a little bit snappier, and a little bit more on top of the events and news that are coming out. And I had so many people send me this news item that we are going to talk about today, and it's going to be the news item that we talk about exclusively today. And that, of course, is this whistleblower who is claiming that the U.S. has retrieved craft of non-human origin.
Yes.
And this in particular is very difficult because so much is classified and so much is behind closed door, like, to begin with, that it's hard to even get into it and even talk about it without just kind of throwing up your hands and saying like, well, we don't have that information. So there'll be a lot where we're like, oh, except we don't know and we don't have that information and this is what we have been told, but that's, black lined, crossed out, whatever, right?
Yeah.
This was an article that came out on June 5th on the website thedebrief.org, which the debrief itself calls itself a rebelliously curious magazine that explores frontier science and innovative technology. So they have a bunch of stuff that's really like what I consider cutting edge, bleeding edge when you're talking about aerospace innovations, space exploration, travel, all of that kind of technological advancement reporting. And they also have a pretty healthy section of news items relating to UFOs, which we now call UAPs, which are not actually unidentified aerial phenomena, but that is unidentified anomalous phenomena. Doesn't necessarily need to be in the air.
It can be found on a mountainside or in a cave or something like that, which is kind of cool. It really opens it up. I like that.
Yeah, well, I think it's important in terms of it could be something that, in this case, has crashed, right? Where you don't necessarily need to see it in the sky in order for it to be a UAP, right?
Exactly.
So David Grusch was a former combat officer in Afghanistan. He's a veteran of an organization called the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office. He came forward and said that he has information on what he claims are extraterrestrial craft that were found and recovered by the U.S. government as well as other countries' governments, and were being held in secret and were being actually kept in secret from Congress, U.S. Congress. According to Grusch, and according to the article in the debrief, these were fragments of intact crafts that had been found going back decades. Probably, if you were to talk about it, probably all the way back to, say, Roswell or the Aztec crash in New Mexico in the 1940s. And according to him, we have found, as he says, of exotic origin, non-human intelligence, whether extraterrestrial or unknown origin, based on vehicle morphologies and material science testing and the possession of unique atomic arrangements and radiological signatures. He filed a complaint that this information was being withheld from Congress, from the U.S. government, by these recovery agencies. And also that he was being pressured and had some type of hostile response for coming forward.
Hence getting legal representation.
Yeah, so he had legal representation to help that.
There are protections. There are legal protections.
Yes.
No retaliation.
Yeah. So there is legislation in place that would prevent retaliation against a whistleblower, which is important because you need to have that in order for governments to not become like completely corrupt, right?
Right.
It's important that exists, and he should not have seen any repercussion against his whistleblowing.
Right.
He claims that he did, and he didn't provide any details of that at all, which is not in any way to say that's not an attack against his character at all. It's just that he didn't talk about it.
Right. Well, probably because there might be a case ongoing.
I think it's still, it's part of an ongoing investigation.
Right. And also, just by the way, everybody, that's not an alien in our house with us. That is our kitten. She might be making some weird noises because she does that. She's very noisy. So sorry about the noise.
I don't think you should ever have to apologize for a kitten.
It's just weird thunking and
it's
chirping.
Around. It happens.
Yeah.
So the language of this is recovered craft in the U.S., in other countries, and specifically, very specifically saying that it is non-human origin. Right? Non-terrestrial origin, meaning that he's trying to make sure that there's no connotation that, oh, this is Russian, this is Chinese. It's not something that came from this planet, is what he is claiming. And he's claiming that these are being held and the information is being restricted from Congress. And by coming forward about this, there was retaliation against him.
I guess my one of my many questions is I'm trying to figure out why they're keeping Congress from this information. What would be the point? What's being gained by stopping the congressional oversight?
My gut instinct is that that's probably one of those classified information type things that's like for your eyes only. I don't know how much information Congress has about all of the highly classified operations that are going on all over the world all the time.
I guess I'm confused as to what is top secret and what isn't.
Here. It becomes a question, too, of is he correct, I think. Because if he is incorrect, and we have not been withholding extraterrestrial craft and the possession of extraterrestrial craft from Congress, then there's no story here, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, if he is incorrect and there are no extraterrestrial crafts, then of course Congress is not being briefed on the extraterrestrial crafts that we've caught, that we found.
There's nothing to brief them on.
Because there's nothing to brief them on. And so that's a question of the framing, right? If we can prove that it actually happened, then you can say, oh, why weren't you telling Congress? But right now, we don't have any information that it actually happened beside him talking about it. So it's hard to say, should Congress have been told or not?
Yeah, and because I'm just like, a regular person.
Right.
I don't know what level of clearance Congress should have.
I don't know.
Like maybe this, because the way that this was put is this is like the most top level secret stuff.
Right.
And should Congress know? Or is it a moral obligation? Does it go beyond confidentiality? And is it actually a moral obligation that our
Right.
leaders should know about this stuff? Yeah.
And this enters into an interesting question that always comes up with regard to this, which is if we made contact, if it happened, we just finished up the Adamski series, if the Space Brothers came down and talked to a 60-year-old guy and the government finds out about it, should the government keep that secret from the American public, and why? Like, what would be the reasoning for the government keeping that secret?
Isn't that the age-old question?
And that's what it is. Like, if you can justify why the government would be keeping it secret, maybe because they don't want to create the panic over it, maybe because they are unsure if there are military capabilities or if we are in some kind of jeopardy, or they're just trying to figure out the right framing for this. Does it call into question things like existing sciences that we have, that we believe, something like that? Mm-hmm. That's the age-old question with this. Why, if the government finds out about it, are they obligated to tell us, or are they obligated to withhold the information until they can find the right frame to put on it to tell us? And what is better for the general population? Would people lose their shit and start buying guns and start shooting people in the street because they say, oh, the aliens look like us, right? Like these are all kind of questions that you would need to think about depending on the nature of all of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean,
humans are they don't tend to be the most reasonable and rational of the species.
No, definitely not. If people already believe that there are aliens walking among us. People already believe that there are aliens walking among us.
They absolutely do.
To say it wholesale officially from the government, that could lead to some real problems.
Right. And that can be used as a reason why the government would want to suppress this information if it was coming out.
Right, but this isn't just government from the people. This is intelligence committees.
Right.
Keeping it from Congress,
right.
Keeping it from the people. So Congress doesn't even get this.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is interesting to me.
Well, and this sort of points to the notion of like a shadow government, mm-hmm. which is a very familiar conspiracy theory mm-hmm. that we haven't touched on at all, but we're going to touch on as we start to continue with our UFO series. We finished Adamski. And I'm actually right now working on a very famous UFO crash in New Mexico that'll be the subject of a forthcoming series. Mm-hmm. And we're going to sort of continue going through the history of UFOs and government involvement. We will talk about Area 51, and we will talk about the Mirage Men and the birth of like the Men in Black and the disinformation campaign and all of that comes along with that. And all of this sort of gets wrapped up in this notion that there are branches of the government that exist and operate in completely clandestine ways mm-hmm. that are completely independent from other branches, other oversight, all of that.
Honestly, I don't find that too hard to believe. Maybe that's just me. But
it's essentially like having, you have your undercover police officers who are so deep undercover and in the drug rings that mm-hmm. it's like Departed style. Like they don't have a history here. If something goes bad, we can't pull them out because they don't have a record. Like that sort mm-hmm. of thing.
There's a term for that in the CIA. It's like
NOC, right?
NOC, yeah.
NOC,
isn't it?
NOC, non-official,
official cover.
Non-official cover,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I only know that from Hitman.
Isn't it also in that show we love? What's that show?
Patriot?
Yes.
I don't remember. He probably is. I mean, that's the whole concept of Patriot is that he's like this completely unofficial guy.
Yeah.
So the shadow governments start to come into prominence in the, I'd say like the late 60s, but also the early 70s. And there are a couple reasons for that. And specifically when it comes to like Area 51 and whether or not they're keeping UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, there's a very specific reason why that started to happen. And I think, honestly, I think it's because some very smart people in the government came to the realization that you can't keep a lid on all of the information that leaks. You just can't. Like, stuff is gonna leak and it's gonna get out there. And so the realization was the best way to do it is just completely muddy the waters. I think that this all started due to the Cold War. And what the technology that we were working on in these places like Area 51, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, all of these places, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, of course, where they took the gray aliens after the Roswell crash, allegedly. When leaks started to come out of these places and people said, oh, I've never seen this type of craft before, the government just said, oh, it's better to say we can't comment on it than to deny or to give an explanation. And so what started happening is them saying, well, we can't talk about that. And that lets the story fester and that lets the story grow. And then all of a sudden, a drone from Russia becomes, oh no, I saw an alien spacecraft. And the government says, well, I can't confirm that that was an alien spacecraft. And that gets spun into, well, it was.
I think that the problem with the idea that this top secret stuff is going on globally, because that's what it says in the article.
Yes, right.
I'm having a really hard time believing that that's true. So the concern that some of these people have in the article is this very intense, like, advanced technology is out there.
Right.
It's been out there for decades. It's been out there since World War II, maybe even earlier.
Sure.
People have had their hands on it
Right.
all across the world.
Yes.
I'm having a hard time believing that in this day and age, in 2023, if that's true, Putin would not be using it. You know, all of our like enemies would not be having this technology.
Well, I think you speak to something else sort of indirectly, where when we look at technology, when we look at space travel, flight, even microprocessors and computers, all of these things, we can chart from where we are technologically now, all of the steps going back to the very beginning of all of it in the simple machines throughout the last 100, 200, 500,000 years, right? Look at the airplane. Airplane is probably, or let's go even further. Look at drones, right? Where if you reverse engineer a drone, you get an airplane. If you reverse engineer an airplane, you get all the way back to Wright brothers, and we can cite all of the journey back to that.
There isn't a single bit of technology that we have today that cannot be reverse engineered.
Right. There's never the jump that you would expect if all of a sudden there was a new amount, like a new craft or something new that was dropped into our lap that we said, oh, wow, we've never seen this piece of tech before.
Yeah, and are you telling me that all these world leaders that we have problems with are cooperating and are being like, oh yes, no, well, I do want to like, you know, get rid of Ukraine and stop the free world. As the leader of North Korea, I want to like end the free world. But I'm gonna draw the line when it comes to alien technology. I'm not gonna use that.
Or don't you think that someone like Putin would use the fact that our government has been withholding that information against us and say, yo, you can't trust your government? I remember when I was a kid, there was this book that came out called The Day After Roswell by Philip Corso and William Burns. And this was one of those books that alleged that after the UFO crash at Roswell, we got all this tech and we reverse engineered it, and now we had all of these things that we didn't have before. And only we had it, right? Because only we and our allies got that craft. So China wouldn't have all the technological advancement that we did. But guess what?
Every country develops technology.
Sure.
And
yeah.
so what this feels like to me, now that you're talking about it, is the idea that, like, America is the one true country to have the alien technology, as compared to Christianity is the one true religion. Everybody else is wrong. I feel like it's a very it's just like this, it speaks to this like singularity. Our country is the best country in the world. Christianity is the best religion in the world. It's the only religion that's right. It just speaks to this like homegrown, almost nationalistic idea that we're the only ones with anything worthwhile. Yeah. And I just don't believe it for a second. Like if there really are aliens globally hitting other places, what is stopping anybody? What is stopping some Irish farmer in Galway from finding this piece of metal in the earth that doesn't exist anywhere else and saying something about it? Like, I'm having a hard time buying this. That's my biggest problem.
Also, side note, how shitty are the alien spacecrafts that they're crashing all the time?
That's true.
Like, if you take Roswell as a singular event and you're like, that was the crash, then you're like, okay, I kind of understand that. But if you're telling me that there are aliens crashing tech all over our planet, like, what the fuck, man? You gotta get a lot better at this shit. Yeah. You Laurel do. And Hardy of aliens over here.
I know, right? It's funny. I don't believe it, and I think that over enough time, sure, you can see some crashes happening. Of course, nobody's perfect, not even aliens. You know, the only perfect person in the whole world is Jared Giso. Okay, so, but I'm having a hard time believing that there aren't mistakes. That, you know, like things get out, and you cannot possibly tell me that all governments of the world are that good and that coordinated to find that farmer in Ireland and shut him up and give him enough money and or silence him for good. You know, it's just too perfect. I'm not saying that this guy is a liar. I'm not saying anything. I'm just really wondering how the hell governments are all going to be so cooperative when it comes to this kind of stuff.
And that's sort of was it Benjamin Franklin? 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
Wow, I don't I didn't know he said that. That's awesome. I don't know if he said that. But I can see him saying that. I can see him being like, all right, young Jimmy, here's a kite. And this is how technology works, and this is how electricity works. And by the way, if you kill 2 of your friends, you know you can keep a secret.
I mean, so it's attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but I will admit that a lot of times quotes attributed to like Benjamin Franklin and Mark Twain and
Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde. You see all the time that like Luke, I am your father, Oscar Wilde. Like there's always these quotes that are always attributed to them, and then you dig into it a little more, and they're like, oh, no, we have no idea who said this. So, but that colloquialism, that epitaph, you know, three can keep a secret if 2 are dead. Like when I think about, you know, all of the disclosure that happened surrounding the Trump campaign and all of these people who were getting fired left and right and coming out and speaking out about it, and they were just disgruntled people. They weren't potentially like moralistic people who would say, wow, I found this thing, this is really strange. It's hard for me to believe as you start to scale up and up and up and up that you could possibly have all of these people keeping a essentially singular secret that aliens are real and we've encountered them in any length of time before that secret gets out. I think that's where the muddying the water is important, because again, what secrets do you not want to get out? Well, you don't want like our espionage secrets to get out. You don't want our technology secrets to get out, like the top secret military operations that people are working on now. So the best way to do that is to throw a whole bunch of false reports out there, including reports that are like, oh, we found an alien spacecraft.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not saying I am not saying Grusch is a counterintelligence operative this way.
Right.
I'm legitimately not, and I legitimately don't believe that. But Mick West, who's a UFO reporter, brought this up, and I think he makes a good point, which is that it's not hard to believe that someone might be working on a craft that we recovered of unknown origin. I'm not saying like of extraterrestrial origin. I'm just saying we found something and we didn't know what it was. Think like the balloons that we were finding just a couple of months ago, right? So you bring that to a lab, you bring that to a research station, you have people looking into it, trying to figure out what it is, and you stack that with a government that's already running these counterintelligence procedures where they say, well, we can't talk about where this came from. It's not hard to see how that thread becomes, oh, this is probably of extraterrestrial origin because we don't know where it came from and we can't talk about where it came from.
Right.
And then this gets reported to Grusch, and all of a sudden Grusch starts to take this as, oh, we have spacecraft and they are not being reported to Congress.
Right.
That's what Grusch runs with, and that's what he takes to Congress, essentially, and says, why doesn't Congress know about these crafts of extraterrestrial origin? Well, they never were. They were just downed Chinese or Russian or North Korean or whatever that we recovered and we called unknown, quote unquote.
So we're talking about perhaps like a game of telephone,
I think that's not an unreasonable explanation for what's going on. Again, given what we know about how the government works.
So the thing that makes me wonder too is that Grusch seems to have a top secret clearance.
Yes.
So I don't know who's got clearance above him. I'm sure there's plenty of clearance above him, but I get the impression that he gets pretty close. So he has pretty close contact with this stuff.
Right.
I would believe that theory more if it was somebody of a lower rank, somebody who was less higher up.
Sure.
And me not knowing anything about clearance, I'm just saying that he seems like somebody who has direct contact with this kind of technology. Like he's speaking as if he has seen it.
He served, this is a quote, direct quote from the debrief article. He served as the Reconnaissance Office's representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force from 2019 to 2021. From late 2021 to July 2022, he was the NGA's co-lead for UAP analysis and its representative to the task force.
Yeah, so he was close.
So, like, this was his job. His job was to go out, find unidentified stuff, and bring it back.
I just go back to, like, if this is happening all over the globe, where are people coming forward and saying, oh, yeah, that landed in my yard, or,
right.
Oh, yeah, I dug that up when I was building a pool, you know?
Well, and you could say that the government is restricting that.
They're doing a great job then.
They're doing
squeaky clean.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job.
Yeah. I think the other important thing to remember here is the frame that this information is coming from. Is there a reason here why Grusch might tend more toward the belief that the crafts he's recovering are of extraterrestrial origin? The article was written by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumthal, who were at the forefront of the disclosure that happened just recently. There was all over the news about how we were going to get all this disclosure from the U.S. government, and Congress was having panels on it and all of that stuff, and then it ended up being absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah.
The backing behind all of that and the connection of all of that comes from, let's talk about this source. Well, let's talk about this.
Hey.
So, EJ, put yourself back to the 2000s, right? Okay. Let's go back to the 2000s.
Early 2000s?
Like mid 2007, say.
Okay.
2007-ish.
Let's see, what do I got? I don't even know what I was wearing back then. I'm just trying to think of, like, the world, placing myself. I need, like, a BoJack Horseman, like, backward montage.
We need the song about it.
It's 2007, and I don't know what's happening.
Okay. You know what's happening?
No idea.
Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is meeting with a man named Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow happened to be a major donor to Harry Reid. Bigelow pressures Reid. Not like pressure, but they're buddies and they're talking, and Bigelow's like, hey, I'm looking to get some funding for some research programs that I'm going to do. And so Bigelow secures $22 million over the course of several years to research unidentified aerial phenomena and extraterrestrial intelligences and also bizarre shit. So Bigelow creates almost this pseudo X-Files type of place. And this, our listeners might recognize as being Skinwalker Ranch. So this leads to like A-tip. I promise that in the coming series is we're going to talk about all of these things, but this leads to A-tip. This leads to the Stars Academy. This leads to Bigelow's connection to Blink 182.
All right.
And Dom DeLonge.
It's an old reference. These are 2007 reference, kind of. Though I think they've been around before that. But
they were around long before that. Yeah. But Bigelow and the Skinwalker Ranch are this sort of hub of weird, bizarre extraterrestrial and terrestrial experiences, and they have all kinds of strange shit going on, from like extra dimensional Bigfoots to other like just crazy shit, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So associated with them is Leslie Kean, who wrote this article for the Debrief on Grusch. So Leslie Kean already has something of a beat of sorts as a reporter. So she is a UFO sort of disclosure reporter. So it's not surprising that she hopped on this story, and it's not surprising that she reported this the way she did. Mm-hmm. What's also interesting, this is a really interesting little side note to everything. Stephen Greenstreet, who writes for the New York Post, was doing some background research into David Grusch and found a Facebook post by a guy named Eric Davis. So Eric Davis is an astrophysicist. He's a government contractor, and he works for one of Robert Bigelow's programs. Eric Davis posted on Facebook, Gary Nolan and I have been working together since 2009, and what he told the reporters is 100% accurate. Much of what he said is partly based on my work over 25 years and the more recent work of my now former special security officer who works in Colorado Springs and is the U.S. government whistleblower who remains unknown but will become known in a soon-to-be-published expose in the Washington Post. That whistleblower that he's referring to is David Grusch, which means that David Grusch was working for Eric Davis, who was working for Robert Bigelow.
That's an unfortunate connection.
Which puts him sort of at the center of this money funneling mm-hmm. operation that is Skinwalker Ranch, mm-hmm. where, Skinwalker Ranch, just a little reminder, $22 million from Harry Reid and Congress to Skinwalker Ranch and Robert Bigelow for the research into these programs. Like, even if it worked, even if you were doing like legitimate science with it and all of that, where did it go? Like, what is the result of that $22 million invested? Because we have no further evidence of UFOs aside from this guy who's coming forward and says, "Oh, I have all, it's classified."
I just don't like it. I personally, as a taxpayer, I don't like that idea that the money is getting funneled into these places. And as somebody who I appreciate science and I appreciate scientific method, it really does concern me that all that money went into that endeavor. Yeah. And it concerns me that Grusch has a connection to a place like that, who really does have a financial benefit to pushing the alien narrative. Because the more you push the narrative, the more potential funding his guy could get.
Well, and that's what it seems like, right? We had the disclosure recently, amounted to nothing, but kept UFOs, UAPs in the press. Mm-hmm. Now we have this again, which seems like it's going to be a whole other nothing burger, as everybody says. Because at the very least, like, everything is so classified that we're not going to get any further information anyway. Mm-hmm. But it keeps the public interested. It probably keeps the public pressuring Congress.
Oh, for sure.
Right? The public narrative to be like, oh no, we need to invest money in these research programs. Well,
Right.
guess where the research programs are? They happen to be Robert Bigelow's Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
Robert Schaefer wrote an article in May of 2020 titled Claims About a Government UFO Program, How Much is True, that was published on skeptic.com, where he goes deep, deep, deep into Skinwalker Ranch. And I promise that we will do a Skinwalker Ranch series. And so we're just going to skim the very, very surface of all of this. Okay, so we talked about the money being funneled into Skinwalker Ranch, right? From Harry Reid, the $22 million over 5 years, all that good stuff. Don't forget that Skinwalker Ranch also has a series, right? Hunt for Skinwalker Ranch?
I think it's the Hunt
Something
for Skinwalker
like that, right?
Ranch. Yeah, horribly boring.
It's such a bad show. Like
God, it was so
we tried to watch,
boring.
and I'm into this shit, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my god, okay.
It's like tedious.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so the question is like, what the hell was going on there? Like you said, what did they do with all that money that got funneled in? And how was Blink-182 and Tom DeLonge involved? So apparently some of the money that got funneled there did go to the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, by way of Bigelow's sponsorship of MUFON. Now, they also were working apparently on metamaterials. They published 38 papers on what is called quote-unquote weird science. So all this sort of research, that kind of thing. They were looking into some of the psychic programs that the government had been running, like the Project Stargate, the Men Who Stare at Goats
Right.
program, where they were looking into whether psychical research could be done or not. Remember, the government shuttered Project Stargate in the 90s, and that torch got picked up and continued by Robert Bigelow, even though in the 90s the government literally said there is no reason for this program to continue because this is a dead end.
Does that mean that he's still conducting the experiments, or is he just writing papers on it as a retrospective?
As far as I know, he's still conducting experiments.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Research. We shouldn't say experiments, but
right.
research
There's
into it.
research,
Yes.
okay.
But to conclude all of this, and this concludes Schaefer's article, fortunately for all the phenomena at Skinwalker is almost certainly illusory. Not only was the year-long monitoring of Skinwalker by NIDS unable to obtain proof of anything unusual happening, but the people who owned the property prior to the Shermans, a family whose members lived there for 60 years, deny that any mysterious phenomena of any kind occurred there. Claims about the ranch were made up by the Sherman family prior to selling it to the gullible Robert Bigelow. Many of the really bizarre alleged incidents described in Hunt for the Skinwalker were witnessed only by Terry Sherman, the former owner, who stayed on the ranch as a caretaker after it was sold to Bigelow. It's unclear to me whether Bigelow was duped or whether Bigelow was part of the duping.
Yeah. Right.
I know that Bigelow is associated with George Knapp. I know that Bigelow is associated with Bob Lazar. Which Bob Lazar, having us just come off of Adamski, is a fascinating individual because guess what frequents into Bob Lazar's craft? Do you know the story of Bob Lazar at all?
Not really.
So Bob Lazar claims that he worked at Area 51 and worked on a spacecraft.
Oh, that guy. Okay.
The saucer.
Yes. Yes.
It was a saucer. At the bottom, it had they weren't landing gear, but it had 3 different little pegs that came out of the bottom that would move that allowed it to fly. If you look at Bob Lazar's depiction of it, it looks a hell of a lot like Adamski's craft. It's just the exact same thing again. It's the same saucer craft.
And Lazar came after Adamski?
Yes,
Okay.
long after. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you had Adamski in the 50s, 60s. Bob Lazar, I believe, was in the 80s or 90s. He was on Coast to Coast.
Oh, okay.
Coast to Coast Radio. He was on there a whole bunch talking about his experiences at Area 51.
Okay.
And working on this craft that he claimed was extraterrestrial, which, again, this is just the same story over and over again, right? He claimed that this craft was extraterrestrial. It's very fascinating to me that it's exactly the same design as Adamski's Space Brother craft.
Right.
Which also happens to be the same design that people say crashed at Roswell, that they say
It's in the public consciousness now. It's never leaving.
So all of that is to say that it appears that Grusch has a connection and was working for Robert Bigelow, who is the recipient of this governmental money to work and research on these somewhat experimental programs. And so it's not surprising to me that Grusch may have been mentally predisposed to see these crafts as something of extraterrestrial origin rather than something of like earthly terrestrial origin.
Right. That's kind of the at worst scenario. Like at best, like if all of this is very true and
Right.
Grusch is really like, you know, he's a decorated veteran and I respect
Yes.
him very much. And
yeah,
this-
absolutely.
This could absolutely be, sure, like let's just say it's real. At the very least, it's just a little concerning that there is such a murky connection here with it just muddies things, you know, that he's not just some guy from but he does have a connection to the ranch.
Right.
And that's
these
concerning.
are the things that you have to really look at when you're looking at the whole piece, right?
In no way am I drawing a conclusion at all, or I think we are.
No, it's a story that we have to keep an eye on for sure. We'll see what happens. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that so much is so classified that it's going to be hard for us to determine anything from the result of this, but maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe this will be the time that we will. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I have a lot of skepticism about Skinwalker Ranch and about the things that occur on Skinwalker Ranch, allegedly. Like I said, we're going to talk about all that in the future. You know, we're just going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to see what transpires off of this.
It's more interesting than the usual, like, oh, I saw an alien out my window thing,
Right.
which is what I thought this was until I read the article and I was like, oh no, this is an actual like guy with top secret clearance who is saying he's making such a big claim.
And to be completely clear, I think it's right that he came forward. Whether he actually did see alien craft, which apparently he didn't see any of the craft at all, but like whether he has knowledge of an alien craft or whether it's just a terrestrial craft or anything, I think it is important to, this is how checks and balances work, right?
Yeah.
Like whistleblowing is a necessary part of government to make sure that there's not overreach, that we are not being kept in the dark from things. There should be transparency, and I think that this is important no matter how it shakes out.
Yeah, and I think that the last thing people should do as a society is point and laugh at anybody who comes forward with any kind of information like this.
Absolutely.
So take everything one at a time.
Yeah. There's plenty of people to point and laugh at, and these are not those people.
Exactly.
So, I mean, guys, watch the skies. If you have property, take some time today, assuming that your air is clear. Our air was really, really smoky for the past week up here.
Real bad.
In the Northeast. But if you have property, take some time today, go out, walk your property, see if you find a spacecraft. Because if you find a spacecraft, I think you could probably sell it to Skinwalker Ranch for a really nice price.
Yeah.
And let us know if you do. We'll interview you on the podcast. Tell us about the spacecraft you found on your property.
Yeah. Oh, I want to hear about your alien stories.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about your alien stories.
Yeah, anything, because I have none. I nobody cares about me.
Yes.
Nobody wants to say hello to me from the skies. I'm not interesting enough, I guess, but maybe you are. So
yeah, alien encounters, UFO stories. We call them UAP stories now, but yeah, alien encounters, UAP stories.
Anything.
Let us know what you got.
Yeah, please.
Cool.
Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for this. This was a little bit more off the cuff than what we normally do, but this story was just so popular and is exploding all over everybody's social media. And I mean, it's aliens, dude. We got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. So, yeah, if you see anything awesome in the news like this, send it our way. Like I said, listeners sent this over to us and really incentivized me to report on it. So, yeah, you see anything else that you think fits in with our cryptids, ghosts, UFOs, weird archaeology. I'm always into weird archaeology. Like I want to talk about, like I really want to do a series on the Curse of the Pharaohs and that sort of thing.
Oh, that would be cool.
So yeah, look, we've wrapped Adamski at this point. We're gonna get into something else really cool. We're gonna get a little hairy with the next series, and yeah, we'll be here hanging out.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for
Be
listening.
safe out there.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters. If you like the podcast and what we do, please share it with others or leave us a rating and review. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on Instagram @slayingmonsterspodcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.